Readers, do you remember what a prefix is? We've learned that a prefix is a word part that we add to the beginning or front of a word to change that word and its meaning. Today, our goal is to read and understand words with the prefixes for and trans. Read these prefixes with me. For, trans. Now, the prefix for means before or in front of. And the prefix trans can mean across or beyond. Let's read some words with these prefixes and sort them into the correct column. Here's our first word. Read with me. Foresee. This word is foresee. If that was a challenging word for you, you can always remember that we can read this in two parts. First, we look at the prefix, for, and then we look at what's left, our base word, see. And then when we put them together, we have the word foresee. Now, I wonder if foresee means across or if it means in front of or before. Let's see. We see that this prefix matches for, which can mean before or in front of. So foresee must mean to see something before. To see something before it happens. It's like making a prediction or a good guess about what's going to happen. When I think of this word, I think of my kalanchoe plant. I did not foresee how big this plant was going to become. So I planted it in a pot that was much too small. Do you see the difference there? Now this plant's not very healthy and I'm trying to rescue it. Let's read another word together. Here's our next word. Read with me. Transplant. Transplant. Again, you can read this in two parts. First, by looking at the prefix trans, and then looking at what's left, the base word plant. Now, what would transplant mean? Which prefix does it have? It has the prefix trans, which means across or beyond. And I know that the base word plant means to put a plant or a seed into the ground, but it can also mean to put something in a certain place. So when you transplant something, that means that you must be moving something across a distance to a new place. When I think of this word transplant, which has the trans prefix, I think of how I had to transplant this kalanchoe plant from this small pot to this large one so that the plant would continue to grow. Let's read a new word together. Read with me. Forethought. Do you see the two parts that you could have read to read this word accurately? We see which prefix first? That's right. This has the prefix for. And then we're left with the base word thought. We put it together and we get the word forethought. Now let's see if we can figure out what this means using what we know about the prefix for. For means before or in front of. And thought is about the things that you think. So forethought must be what you think about before something happens. If I had had the forethought to learn about kalanchoe plants, I would never have planted this plant in that tiny pot because I would have known better. Let's read one more word together. Here we go. It's a long one. Read with me. Transatlantic. Transatlantic. Again, we can read this in two parts. First, by thinking about the prefix. Which prefix is it? Trans. And then looking at what's left. Atlantic. Now, we know that trans can mean across or beyond. And Atlantic refers to the, do you know? The Atlantic Ocean. So transatlantic must refer to something that goes across the Atlantic Ocean. One thing that I've learned about kalanchoe plants is that most kinds of kalanchoe plants didn't used to grow in North America. That makes me wonder if some of these plants made a transatlantic journey to make it here. Now that we've practiced reading and understanding what words with the prefixes for and trans mean, let's see if we can read some of these words in a text. We are getting good at reading and understanding words with the for and trans prefixes. Let's read this text and see if we can understand what some of those words mean when we find them in our text. Have you ever been on a transatlantic trip? Did you notice a word with one of our prefixes? I did. The word transatlantic. What does that mean? Well, we remember that trans can mean across, and Atlantic refers to the Atlantic Ocean. So transatlantic means to go across the Atlantic Ocean. It's asking if you have ever gone across the Atlantic Ocean on a trip. Let's move on. Well, a tiny bird called the blackpoll warbler has, I didn't notice any trans or for prefixes there. Scientists had the forethought to put a tiny transmitter on the warbler to see how it migrated. I noticed a couple there, did you? What was the first one that we read? Well, first I saw the word forethought. We know that for can mean before or in front of, and thought is about what we think. So forethought is what we think before something happens. It's about planning for what is going to happen. So now that we understand this word, what's the other one that has the prefix that we've been studying? Transmitter. Now this word is a little bit trickier. Transmitter has trans, which can mean across or beyond. And then it has this part, mitter. Now, I know that the root here, mit, means to send. So with that information, transmitter means to send something across a distance. That makes sense because a transmitter is a piece of equipment that sends information across a distance to a different place. Let's move on in our text. It flew across the ocean for 3 days straight. I didn't notice any of the prefixes there. Let's start this again and read this whole text fluently so that we can understand what we're reading about. Have you ever been on a transatlantic trip? Well, a tiny bird called the blackpoll warbler has. Scientists had the forethought to put a tiny transmitter on the warbler to see how it migrated. It flew across the ocean for 3 days straight. Great work reading and understanding words with the for and trans prefixes. Now that we've had so much practice reading words with the prefixes for and trans, let's see if we can spell words with these prefixes. You're going to need your paper or whatever it is you're going to write on, and then something to write with like a pencil or a crayon. Now, when we spell words, we try to visualize or make a picture in our mind of how many word parts that word has. Then we think about the sounds that we hear in each of those word parts. Are you ready to try it? Here we go. Our first word is transfix. Say that with me. Transfix. When I hear the word transfix, I hear 2 parts. Transfix. We're going to start by stretching out the sounds that we hear in the first part. Trans. Maybe you already remember how to spell this from all of our practice reading this prefix. Now, when I think about trans, I hear 5 sounds. What I hear first is tr, tr. two sounds together in a blend. Tr. Then I hear this. Tr. And z. And this prefix, the S, is making that Z sound. Trans. Did you write this down on your paper? If you did, does it match what I have here? Great work. Now, let's move on to the next part of the word. We said that the word is transfix. So we still need to write the part fix. How many sounds do you hear in fix? I hear 3 sounds. X, fix. Now, when we put these two parts together, we'll have our whole word. With me, you should write this word on your paper again, putting those two parts together. Trans, fix. Transfix. The word transfix means to make something be motionless. Maybe my attention could be transfixed by a seagull flying in the distance, and I remain motionless as I watch it. That's what transfix means. Are you ready to try a new word? Our next word is foretell. Say that with me. Foretell. How many parts do you hear in the word foretell? I hear 2 parts. Foretell. I'll write down 2 lines, and you can do the same for each of the parts in the word. Now let's start with the first part that we hear. For. Now I'm going to write down all the sounds that I hear in for, and you can do the same. Or. I also remember from my reading that this prefix has the silent E. For. That can help a vowel make its long vowel sound. For. For. Does your work match mine? Now, let's write the second part of this word. Foretell. See if you can write down all the sounds that you hear in tell. I hear 3 sounds, but there might be more than 3 letters. L. Do you see what I mean? 3 sounds, t, L. But at the end, instead of having 1 L, we have 2. We often write a double L at the end of a word, a base word, when we have a short vowel sound. Not always, but it can happen. Now that we have both parts of this word, let's write it again to write the entire word. For, and now I'll put the second part with it, tell. Foretell. We've written the word foretell. Foretell means to tell something before it happens. It's like making a prediction and saying it out loud before something happens. Great work today, reading and writing with the prefixes for and trans. While you're reading, you can be looking for these prefixes. Remember to pause and ask yourself, what does this word mean based on what I've learned about these prefixes? I'm so excited that we get to meet again soon to learn more about words together.
This program is made possible in part by the Michigan Department of Education, the State of Michigan, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Additional support by viewers like you. Thank you.